the Rise Up See Red podcast, all about the Arizona Cardinals and the NFL, featuring insider and outsider perspectives. Enjoy the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Now here are your hosts, Jess Root and Seth Cox.
Welcome, Arizona Cardinals fans, to the latest edition of the Rise Up See Red podcast, the best hour of Cardinals of talk on the web. I'm your host, Jess Root from CardsWire.com, as we continue our opponent preview series. Seth Cox, the other host from RevengeOfTheBirds.com, continues to get a break right now as we focus on the Cardinals' opponents in 2023. We'll have 14 of these over the next couple of weeks. And while I don't know what order I'm going to produce them in, because we're recording them at different times, my fifth recording of the day is with Cam DaSilva, the managing editor over at the Rams Wire, frequent flyer of the program, who's been on for the last 3 years to talk about the Rams on this part of the show on this time of year. Cam, welcome to the show, as always.
Thanks for having me back, Jess. It's been quite a different trend over the last few years with the Rams between the Super Bowl and then last year, and a lot of variety.
You go from a Super Bowl to definitely a hangover to what are the Rams doing is kind of the question that people are asking. So I would say that the Rams in 2023 are largely a mystery, because there's still some really good players on that team, and Sean McVay is a fantastic head coach, but they seem to be shedding payroll and talent right and left. Let's go ahead and get started now. If you don't know as well, Cam has been a long-time guy here on the NFL Wire covering the Rams, but he also is one of the major contributors over at SportsbookWire.com, just like me. I believe he is more expert than I know his passion lies in the golf area, from what a lot of the assignments that you take are.
Yeah, when it's not football season, I turn to golf, a little bit of baseball too, but fill that void with a little bit of golf.
To me, it's football, baseball, basketball, and then the other football, not soccer football, but I like the other leagues, the USFL, the XFL,
mm-hmm.
and now dabbling in Canadian football.
There we go. What about arena? Are you getting the indoor?
Well, we have an indoor football team here, and the playoffs are starting. But thus far, I don't think we cover that in terms of the betting stuff. So.
Take a degenerate to bet on that.
All right, let's go ahead and get started talking. We're going to begin talking about the Rams last season, which I guess it's kind of symbolic, the way Sean McVay handled everything in the offseason, where he was out on a yacht during the combine and everything, and it felt like the whole Rams season was off on a yacht after they got their championship. I can guess, obviously, that 2022 fell far below expectations. What were the expectations for last season?
I think they legitimately thought they could repeat. Obviously, they lost some players in the offseason. Von Miller left. Odell was out. But I think they definitely had the goal of at least making the playoffs and trying to make another deep run. Still had Stafford, Cooper Kupp, Aaron Donald, Leonard Floyd. You brought in Bobby Wagner. You brought in Allen Robinson. Jalen Ramsey was still there. So it's not like it was some depleted roster after the Super Bowl. It was really just a matter of injuries taking a major, major toll on the team and preventing them from doing anything productive on either side of the ball, really. Obviously well short of expectations. 5-12 season. You never expect to see that from the team that won the Super Bowl the year prior, but it was just a lot that was out of their hands between injuries and shuffling the roster and
Kupp's injury, staff. Well, and it was a quiet storyline that didn't get talked about enough last offseason was and guys within my circle were saying Matthew Stafford's elbow is far worse than anyone is leading on, and it kind of ended up showing with the time off they had last off season, then going into last year. Matthew Stafford definitely did not, there was magic in Stafford's season in 2021. And 2022 was an injury-riddled Detroit Lions type Matthew Stafford.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you can talk all you want about the Stafford injury at the end of the year with his back and Cooper Kupp's injury with his ankle, Aaron Donald's injury with his ankle. All those really came after the Rams were pretty much out of it. I mean, it was in the second half of the year. They weren't fully out of it, but we kind of realized that this team wasn't going to go very far. But the elbow was a big thing. The offense was terrible. And some part of that was at least Matthew Stafford missing a good portion of the offseason. He didn't throw in the spring. When it came time for training camp, he started to throw fully. And then they kind of limited him a little bit, said he's not going to do teamwork, just going to do individual stuff. And when you have a guy like Allen Robinson coming in and you want to build chemistry with him between the quarterback and receiver, you can't do that when your quarterback is taking he's not out on the field all the time during training camp, and he's not throwing his usual volume of passes during practice. So really the whole offense was just out of sync. The whole Cam Akers thing where you expect him to be the starter in week one and he's on the bench for Darrell Henderson, and then you think they're going to trade him and he's back as a starter. It's just it was never ending drama and confusion and just adversity throughout the year for them.
Were there any bright spots out of what happened last season?
I guess you could say that a lot of the younger players got to play because they lost so many veterans. You got a guy like Kobe Durant, who was a rookie. He got a decent amount of playing time at cornerback in the second half of the year. He's probably going to be their top corner this year. Same with Darian Kendrick. He was a sixth-round rookie who played a significant amount last season. Jordan Fuller was out at safety. You had Nick Scott and Taylor Rapp play just about all of the snaps, and now they're going in free agency, but you're going to have a couple of young safeties step in again this year. I mean, if you're looking for a bright spot, I would say that the play that they got out of their offensive line towards the end of the year was encouraging, given all the injuries that they went through. Coleman Shelton played decent. Rob Havenstein was good at right tackle throughout the season. Dave Edwards turned his season into a deal with the Bills in free agency. So there were some bright spots, and obviously Cooper Kupp was having a great year before he got hurt. Tutu Atwell got a little more playing time than expected, but they're just going to have all that experience that these younger guys got last year translate into, hey, you need to be a starter this year and really play at a pretty high level after being a backup.
Cardinals fans, I want you to pay attention to that name, Coleman Shelton, because he was a guy that had a couple of stints on the Cardinals practice squad and now has kind of developed into a starting offensive lineman, and can play center. Is an okay center, which the Cardinals have been lacking. So, yeah, they are benefiting from a player that the Cardinals actually had in the organization. Alaric Jackson. So I was going to talk more looking forward, but I know they went into last year with Joe Noteboom expected to take over left tackle. We expect, like, on the outside, we expected there to be a dip in play after going from Andrew Whitworth, who was fantastic. Noteboom gets hurt, but wasn't Jackson a bit of a surprise how he played at that position?
Yeah, he played really well. He played right guard and left tackle and really played well at both spots. It was unfortunate that he got shut down for the year because of blood clots, had to go on medication, couldn't continue playing. So they shut him down. But he was an encouraging player. And I mean, he was a promising undrafted rookie out of Iowa when the Rams did sign him. And it's good to see him getting a little bit of more of a shot now. This year, Joe Noteboom, with his contract, you expect him to be the left tackle, but both he and Jackson are going to compete for that spot, I think, and the loser might get a chance to start at one of the guard spots too, because they both have that type of flexibility. So there's some position flex between those two, which is good, but I think they just kind of have to go with the best player and start him at left tackle. Don't worry about the contract. Don't worry about Joe Noteboom's higher salary or whether he's a little worse at guard. You got to play the best player at left tackle, and that might be Jackson.
Coming up next on the Rise Up Seaward podcast, Mr. Cardinals Talk on the Web, let's move toward the offseason and discuss what happened in free agency, what happened in the draft. That's coming up next on Rise Up Seaward. We're back on the Rise Up Seaward podcast, Best Our Cardinals Talk on the Web, still with Cam DaSilva from the Rams Wire, one of our sister sites on the NFL Wire, talking about the offseason. So the Rams made several changes in the offseason and free agency via trade, free agencies. Who are the impact losses that they suffered this offseason, whether it be trade, free agency, and who were the big ads?
So how much time do you have for the losses? Because it's going to take a little while. Jalen Ramsey, Leonard Floyd, Bobby Wagner, Allen Robinson. The list goes on. Ashawn Robinson left. Matt Gay signed with the Colts. Taylor Rapp left in free agency. Their punter, Riley Dixon, is gone. He went back to the Broncos. I mean, they lost so many players. And a lot of it was just their decision. It wasn't necessarily just free agency guys going and signing big contracts elsewhere. They traded Jalen Ramsey. They cut Leonard Floyd. They cut Bobby Wagner. They traded away Allen Robinson. So these were decisions that were made by the coaching staff and front office to kind of pare down the roster, get rid of these big contracts, and shift more towards these younger players. When it comes to their offseason additions, there's not many. Nobody notable, really. They signed Akella Witherspoon a few weeks ago. Really, all their moves have been in the last, I would say, month. They brought in Witherspoon. They signed Marcus Robinson, the wide receiver, Tyler Johnson, former Bucks receiver, brought back Sony Michel for whatever reason. He didn't look very good for the Chargers last year, but they obviously see something in him. So those are kind of their additions. I don't even think all of them are going to make the 53rd man roster. Maybe one or two of them will. Hunter Long was the player they acquired in the Jalen Ramsey trade. He's a tight end with, I think he has one career catch in 2 seasons. They obviously like him. They wanted him as part of that package for Ramsey, but not a lot of big name additions, not with tradition that we've seen with the Rams in years past, where they're going out and trading for these veterans and signing these stars in free agency. It was more of a quiet offseason of subtraction, addition by subtraction.
It is an interesting strategy that they're making, because especially teams that are good, they will try and hang on. And I think last year they tried to hang on to what their championship team is, and rather than kind of just reloading and doing the same thing, once the Cardinals had 2013 to 2015, they just kept trying to recreate it, and then they just got worse. And from 2021 to 2022, when they fell apart in 2021, they felt, it was these other factors rather than and so they brought back basically the same group, and they were awful. So the Rams are going through kind of a roster teardown while maintaining some they are in a much better position than the Cardinals are in terms of overall talent, because they still have Aaron Donald, although he must see some promise in this roster, because he already contemplated retirement once. Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford also on the tail end of his career, but could still play, barring injury, could still play significantly well for a few years. So they didn't do much in free agency. And while they had a gazillion draft picks, 14? Yep. They didn't get to pick. They didn't have a first-round pick. And so some of these names probably will not be known by many. But you start with their first pick in the second round, Steve Avila, a guard out of TCU, player I loved. I would have loved the Cardinals to take him. Goes to the Rams. I assume he's going to plug right. He's going to plug in at one of the 2 guard spots immediately, won't he?
Yeah, I think that's the expectation. He was already getting first-team snaps. Obviously, it's only OTAs and minicamp, but he was already getting first-team snaps at guard, and he can also play center. I don't know that he's going to compete at center, because they do have Brian Allen and Coleman Shelton already there. I think he's best used as a guard on this roster, because it's kind of a weak spot for them. But he's got to be their home run pick. Obviously, you mentioned that they didn't have a first-rounder. He was picked 36, so he was close enough to the first, but he's got to be their home run pick. They've kind of struggled a little bit with some of their early selections in the last few years, but Avila seems like kind of that stud guard that is going to start for 5-6 years and really play at a high level. So he can really solidify that offensive line and kind of just bring some stability to it if he plays at a relatively high level after all the injuries and shuffling they went through last year. So I love the pick when they made it, and I think it'll work out for them.
The rest of the list off the drafts goes like this: Tennessee, Byron Young, not the Alabama defensive tackle Byron Young, but the Tennessee pass rusher Byron Young. Kobe Turner out of Wake Forest, big defensive tackle. Stetson Bennett, quarterback, Georgia. People have heard about him. Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State. Warren McClendon, tackle out of Georgia. Davis Allen, tight end, Clemson. Puka Nacua, guy I low-key like, out of BYU, receiver. Travius Hodges Tomlinson, a tiny cornerback out of TCU. O'Shawn Mathis, edge out of Nebraska. Zach Evans, running back, Ole Miss. Ethan Evans, a punter out of Wingate. You probably never heard of that school. Jason Taylor, the second. Jason Taylor the second out of Oklahoma State, safety. And is that Deshaun or Deshaun Johnson?
Deshaun Johnson.
And 6 of those guys in the final 2 rounds. Tell us about that rest of the list. Who potentially could be some level contributor this year, and what are the guys who are, some of it is just filling a roster, shot in the dark. How many, and which of those guys do you think have a future?
I think the guys that you got to look at are Byron Young, the pass rusher out of Tennessee. He's a 25-year-old pass rusher, so he's a developed adult. I think you expect him to come in and contribute pretty early, especially given the issues that the Rams have at outside linebacker after cutting Leonard Floyd, and they really don't have a single proven pass rusher at outside linebacker. Mike Hoyt is the only one who has a sack in his career, just to give you some context of how thin and inexperienced they are at that spot. Byron Young's the guy I think is going to contribute right away. Puka Nacua, you mentioned you like him. He impressed in OTAs and minicamp. He got some positive reviews from his coaches and teammates about just his work ethic, how quickly he learned the offense. And he kind of seems like that Robert Woods type that can do it all. He can run jet sweeps. He can block. Good possession receiver. Pretty good after the catch too. And then I'll go with Travius Hodges Tomlinson. The cornerback group with this team is like the edge rushers. It's an important position, but there's just not much experience. You got Kobe Durant, who's expected to start, Darian Kendrick, a 6th rounder last year who could start. And then after that, it's not really clear who's gonna be that third corner. Hodges Tomlinson is tiny. I think he's like 5'8", 160 or something like that. But he was a Jim Thorpe Award winner last year, obviously a very good college corner. And he's just going to have to see if he can translate it to the NFL against bigger, quicker receivers.
Guys like that can succeed, but there's always going to be limitations. I remember a long time, there was a guy, Mike Adams, for the Cardinals in the late 2000s, 5'8", 160, built kind of the same way. Stud on special teams. You didn't like it as much when he played on defense, but he was, in fact, the guy, if you remember the Cardinals-Packers playoff game, there were more touchdowns than incompletions. Aaron Rodgers, Kurt Warner. It was Mike Adams who hit Aaron Rodgers, forcing that fumble/interception that Carlos Stanzi returned for the touchdown in overtime to get them the win. So those guys, and I know that Hodges Tomlinson, I know that he is a fierce competitor. I know football. He suffers from short guy syndrome, so you have to make it up in other ways. But that is an interesting group. I think Nacua, if he can find time on the field, can have. I don't think it's going to be quite the level of impact that Tyler Algier had for the Falcons, but he was that important to BYU's offense last year. Just like it went from Tyler Algier's offense that 2 years ago to Nakua's offense last year, and he's athletic enough, and if he can stay healthy, that was one of the problems that he had. If he can stay healthy, I think he'll find himself a nice little niche in the league. I don't know if he'll be a big-time player, but he should be an interesting contributor with the mentality that he's got. I like him. I would have loved him as a late-round pick for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I thought it was a good pick for them, especially at wide receiver where you're going to have Cooper Kupp and Van Jefferson. You know they're going to be your top 2 receivers, but after that, you have Ben Skoranek, who's kind of built like a tight end, can play some fullback, more of a blocking guy. Tutu Atwell hasn't done enough to prove himself, and then you have Nacua who can compete right away for that third role. If he plays well enough, he can earn snaps right away. The Rams aren't afraid to play late round picks right away. They did it with Jordan Fuller a few years ago, 6th rounder as a rookie, starting in week 1. And then the year after that, he was a defensive signal caller. So they're not afraid to get these guys on the field.
Interesting how the offseason has gone, because you could argue that for a few years the Rams easily had the number one receiving core in the division.
Mm-hmm.
If we look at it right now, if you're looking at a trio, and I think I'm going to be writing that later today. It's that time of year for is the NFC West rankings, and obviously Cooper Kupp, he's my number one receiver, even coming off the injury, number one receiver in the division. Mm-hmm. But when your number two is Van Jefferson and your number three is who really knows?
Who knows?
Yeah. They are coming in third or fourth. They're coming in third or fourth, and they might be like it might be Kupp alone that puts them over the Cardinals group, because I like 1, 2, 3. Hollywood, Rondell Moore, and Zach Pascal, I think, is down to number 3, a better, deeper version than what you guys have. But obviously, Kupp makes up for that, because Kupp is a superior number 1 to Hollywood, is as good as we think Hollywood can be. Because Kupp is special, and amazing. I think one of those things, and I'm always interested in things like that when it comes to the draft, because when someone outplays their draft position, then people overdraft looking for the same traits, when you just have to understand that they're just an outlier. Like, there's no reason why, like, you look at, because of where he played at school, you couldn't put a first, second round grade on him. You couldn't. It just doesn't make sense. He got drafted where he should have. He's just outplayed where he was drafted. And a lot of teams try to overcompensate for that. Like, the Brock Purdy last year.
Yep.
The way quarterbacks got drafted this year, you're like, why?
They're all looking for the next Brock Purdy. It's
right. Well, no, he's talking like what team was I with that drafted Tanner McKee, and I'm like, I don't know why Tanner McKee got drafted.
I know.
But let's move on for that. Coming up next on the Rise Up Zero podcast, the best our Cardinals talk about this move ahead of the 2023 season and the outlook that the Rams have. What are their expectations? That's coming up next on Rise Up C-Red. We're back on the Rise Up C-Red podcast, the best our Cardinals talk on the web. We move ahead to look at the 2023 season and what the Rams hope to be. They are a mystery to me, because you could look, like, they still have a great quarterback in Matthew Stafford, a phenomenal receiver in Cooper Kupp. They have on the offensive line, they've got some talent. It's not a good line, but it's also not horrific. And then you add Aaron Donald to the mix on defense. I mean, you could be good, but then we also saw them be bad last year. What are the level expectations for Rams fans for this team?
I think a lot of people are kind of looking for like an 8-9 win season. I think that's reasonable. But they're one injury away from being just a disaster like last year. If you lose Matthew Stafford, Stetson Bennett's not going to win you 8 games. If you lose Aaron Donald, you have nobody to rush the passer. If you lose Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford is not going to have enough weapons on offense to move the ball consistently. So I think kind of their expectations are 8-9 wins among fans. Obviously, the team themselves have higher expectations for this season coming up. They think they can be a playoff team. And Kevin Demoff, their COO, even said he's more excited about this team this year than he was last year coming off the Super Bowl, which is, yes, surprising, because you had so many more proven players last year than you do going into this season. But 8-9 wins, I think, would be a solid season for them. You could creep into 10. It's a tough schedule, though. You got to face teams like the Bengals, the Eagles, the 49ers twice, obviously, Cowboys, Packers, Ravens. So it's not an easy schedule that they're going to face, even though they did finish third last year. But I would set the bar around 8-9 wins.
With the potential playoff ceiling, wild card as their ceiling, what would be their floor, barring bad injury to their key players? If they what do you think their floor is?
I would probably say 5 wins again. It's going to come down to those 3 players that you mentioned, Donald, Kupp, and Stafford, staying healthy, and then B, the younger players really just stepping up and being decent starters. You got to have guys like Kobe Durant at corner, who's got to play well. Mike Hoyt at outside linebacker, he's got to play well. On the offensive line, Joe Noteboom has to step up. Brian Allen or Coleman Shelton at center. Rob Havenstein's going to be a good right tackle, but you need those pieces around the rest of the stars to kind of step up. And for so many years, the Rams were built on, they were a top-heavy roster where they had so many great players and then these kind of role players filling out the roster. Now you have fewer great players and the roster is collectively made up of so many young players. I mean, they have, I want to say it's almost 40 rookies on the team right now.
Wow.
It was 14 draft picks and then they signed 26 undrafted rookies. They've shuffled it since, but I mean, it's just such a young team and these guys are going to have to step up and play. And there's a whole bunch of second year players that are going to have bigger roles too. So a lot of the season is going to come down to those guys playing well and really just rounding out the roster.
And in terms of perception, how do Rams fans view the Cardinals and those matchups this year? Do they view the Rams as far superior to the Cardinals, competitively better than the Cardinals, or even with the Cardinals? I don't. No one thinks anyone is worse than the Cardinals. No one in the league.
Yeah, I was going to say Rams fans think the Cardinals are the worst in the league, and I think that's kind of the sentiment a lot of people have about this team, regardless of who their preferred team is. I think that they think the Rams are competitively better, and it kind of goes back to the way they've kind of just owned the Cardinals in Sean McVay's tenure. It's been what, eight in a row or 8 out of 9 or something that they've won against the Cardinals. So they've had their number, and they don't really expect that to slow down, especially with their first game coming in week 6, I want to say. I don't think Kyler's going to be back for that. So
I predict that is his first game back. That's my personal prediction. Like the talk that he's going to miss more than half the season. He's working. He wants to get back as soon as possible. I'm hearing between week 5 and 8, and my guess he's going to push to the beginning of that. And I think like when I was going through the season prediction, I have him coming back for the Rams game in that first game back.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, honestly. If they let him go until week 8, week 9, and they're already out of it, there's going to be questions about why are you bringing him back if you're 0-8 or 0-7 or 1-7.
There's a big reason why you bring him back, because you'll lose him.
Yeah,
because as a competitor, and what Jonathan Gannon is preaching,
sure.
With what Jonathan Gannon is preaching, you have to bring him back. You can't just shut him down, because that he didn't have that vibe. He didn't vibe well with the team up until that. Now things are going really well because Kyler is ultra competitive, and Gannon promises. He says everything's a competition. On some charity work, they were competing with the packs that they were putting together. But yeah, so I don't know what to. I think the Rams are like in the division. On paper, the 49ers are superior.
Mm-hmm.
But again, it's going to come down to quarterback play as well.
Yep, it always does. Yep,
it's going to come down because going into last year, I thought they were going to be a middling team because of Trey Lance, but because Jimmy Garoppolo played, they were playing well. And then Brock Purdy came in. Then Brock Purdy came in, and that was surprising. But he's limited. He's a limited player. But if he can do that, like if he can Alex Smith his way through, they'll be good. But if he slips it all, that the Seahawks are right there. The Rams, if they're playing at their ceiling, could be right there. The Cardinals aren't going to be there. Like best case scenario, they're going to win 7 games. Best case.
Yeah. I would agree with that. I think that's right in their range, just below the Rams, and that's if Kyler Murray comes back and plays really well and kind of carries the team, I think. Yeah,
for sure. So with that, obviously you can find Cam's work at the Rams Wire, and you can find some of his work at Sportsbook Wire if you are a degenerate like many of us. And Cam, is there anywhere else that Cardinals fans can find you social media wise? Are you on Threads yet?
I am, but I don't use it.
I opened, but I can't. I'm only going to Threads if Twitter dies.
Exactly. That's I don't have enough time in the day for 2 text-based social media apps. I can't flip back and forth and see what people are posting on both of them.
Post the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Not doing it. But I'm on Twitter at Cam DaSilva.
All right. Thanks so much for Cam, for the time. Appreciate it as always. That wraps up this edition of the Rise Up Secret podcast. We'll be back soon with yet another opponent preview. Thanks for listening as always. We'll be back again soon.
Thanks for listening to the latest edition of the Rise Up, See Red podcast. Listen to previous episodes and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Audioboom, or many other podcast platforms so shows are delivered directly to your mobile device. Please give the show a 5-star rating and always support the sponsors who support the show. We'll be back soon for the best hour of Cardinals talk on the web. Rise up, Red Sea, be red, see red, and of course, rise up, see red.